The hero who liberated a nation became the villain of his own story. What no one told you about Gideon is that the man who won impossible battles ended his life in ruins. And you need to know why. Gideon, the man who defeated an army with just 300 soldiers, fell into a trap no one expected. It wasn't an enemy sword that brought him down, but something much more dangerous: his own success. You've probably heard of Gideon's incredible victory against the Midianites, but I bet no one ever told you what happened next. What led Gideon, a man chosen by God, to make decisions that would destroy his own legacy? How did his actions affect not only his life, but the life of all the people of Israel? And most importantly, what can we learn from this story so that we don't make the same mistakes? In this video, we'll unravel the dark secrets of Gideon's life that are rarely discussed. We'll see how even the greatest heroes can fall if they're not careful. And who knows, this story might teach you valuable lessons for today. The beginning of Gideon's story is marked by doubts and insecurities, but as he obeyed God, his faith grew. Each step of obedience brought him closer to becoming the hero Israel needed. And so, Gideon was preparing to face the greatest challenge of his life. Who could imagine that that fearful young man would become one of the greatest judges of Israel? But the Lord had great plans for Gideon, and as we will see, those plans would go far beyond a simple military victory. The stage was set for one of the most incredible demonstrations of God's power in the history of Israel. The story of Gideon's victory against the Midianites is breathtaking. Just imagine, an army of 135,000 men against only 300 Israelites. It seemed crazy, but God had a plan. He wanted to show that victory did not depend on human strength, but on His power. Gideon, now full of courage, led his men in an unusual strategy. Armed only with torches, jars, and trumpets, they surrounded the enemy camp. In the middle of the night, to the sound of trumpets and the war cry, the Midianites panicked. It was a real "God help us." The enemies began to fight among themselves, fleeing in total confusion. This spectacular victory elevated Gideon to national hero status. Suddenly, that insecure young man found himself in the spotlight. All the people of Israel acclaimed him as a great liberator. It was the peak of glory for Gideon, a position that few could dream of achieving. But with great victories come great responsibilities. Gideon now faced a new challenge, dealing with success and fame. How would he maintain his humility in the face of so much recognition? How would he continue to depend on God when everything seemed to be under his control? The victory against the Midianites was just the beginning of a new phase in Gideon's life. He had proven to be a capable leader in times of war, but now he needed to learn to lead in times of peace. The people looked to him for guidance and security. It's interesting to note how God used this victory not only to free Israel, but also to continue shaping Gideon's character. The Lord was preparing him for even greater challenges. The question was, would Gideon remain faithful and humble before God? The story of the miraculous victory against the Midianites teaches us a lot about trust and obedience to God. But it also warns us about the dangers of success. How would Gideon deal with this new reality? Would he keep his focus on the Lord, or would he be carried away by human glory? After the incredible victory against the Midianites, Gideon found himself at a moral crossroads. His men were exhausted and hungry, pursuing the fleeing kings of Midian. When he asked for help from the cities of Succoth and Penuel, Gideon received a negative response that ignited a dangerous flame in him, that of wounded pride. The refusal of these cities to help revealed the first signs of a change in Gideon's heart. The man, once so insecure and dependent on God, now demonstrated a confidence that bordered on arrogance. He promised revenge, saying, "When I return victorious, I will tear your flesh with the thorns of the desert." And Gideon fulfilled his threat. After capturing the Midianite kings, he returned to Succoth and Penuel, unleashing his wrath on the leaders of those cities. It was a moment of darkness in the journey of the one who had been called to be a liberator. Personal revenge took the place of divine justice. The revenge against Succoth and Penuel marks a turning point in Gideon's story. It's as if he tasted power and liked it. The man who once trembled in fear before God's calling now saw himself capable of judging and punishing with his own hands. The question is, did Gideon realize how far he was straying from the path of humility? Or was he, blinded by success and power, continuing down this dangerous slope? The next chapter of his life will show us the consequences of these choices. After the spectacular victory over the Midianites, the people of Israel were in ecstasy. They had seen God act powerfully through Gideon and wanted more. It was then that they made a tempting proposal. "Reign over us, you, your son and your grandson, because you have freed us from the hands of Midian." Just imagine the scene. A man who started as the smallest in his family, now being offered a throne. Gideon's response at first glance seems exemplary. "I will not rule over you, nor will my son rule. The Lord will rule over you." Wow, what a demonstration of humility, isn't it? But was it really that simple? Gideon's words sounded pious, but his subsequent actions would tell a different story. It is interesting to note that although Gideon refused the title of king, he made an unusual request. He told the people, "I have a request to make of you, that each of you give me an earring from your share of the spoils." Judges 8:24. The Midianites, being Ishmaelites, used to wear gold earrings. This request from Gideon, while not explicitly a claim of royal privilege, was significant. At the time, it was common for leaders to receive a portion of the spoils of war. The fact that Gideon specifically asked for the gold earrings suggests that he was accepting a form of payment or honor for his leadership. The Bible tells us that the people responded willingly, saying, "We will give them willingly." They extended a cloak, and each man threw an earring from his share of the spoils into it. The total weight of the gold collected was 1,700 shekels, not counting other ornaments and jewels. This action by Gideon reveals a complexity in his character. On the one hand, he verbally refused the kingship, declaring that the Lord should rule over them. On the other hand, his request for a valuable part of the spoils suggests that he was not completely detached from the rewards and status associated with leadership. This episode shows us how Gideon's actions were not always clear in their intention. While he may have been sincerely trying to honor God with his words, his actions suggest that he was beginning to appreciate some of the benefits associated with the leadership position he held. What would happen next in Gideon's life? How would this humble refusal of the throne affect his future decisions? History shows us that even the best intentions can pave the way for disastrous decisions when we are not vigilant against pride and ambition. After refusing the throne, Gideon made a decision that would profoundly alter the course of his history and that of all of Israel. Using the gold received from the people, he made an ephod, a priestly garment of significant religious importance. Although seemingly an act of devotion, this decision proved to be a serious error in judgment. Gideon, not being a priest and acting without explicit divine authorization, overstepped the bounds of his authority. By creating this ephod, he inadvertently paved the way for practices that deviated from proper worship in Israel. The Bible doesn't specify Gideon's exact intention, but it reports that the ephod became an object of improper worship for the people. The scriptures sadly report, "All Israel prostituted themselves, worshiping him there, and it became a snare for Gideon and his family." This statement reveals the seriousness of the situation. The man whom God had used to destroy the altar of Baal now ironically became an instrument for the return of the people to idolatry. This episode illustrates how even seemingly noble intentions can result in disastrous consequences when not aligned with the divine will. Gideon, possibly believing he was honoring God, was actually competing with the worship established by the Lord. It is a warning about the dangers of acting based on one's own judgment in spiritual matters. The ephod became a snare, a term that denotes the seriousness of its implications. We can only imagine Gideon's inner conflict as he witnessed the people worshiping the object he had created. Would he have recognized the magnitude of his error? Or was pride blinding him to the gravity of the situation? This narrative teaches us the crucial importance of seeking divine guidance before acting, especially in matters related to worship and religious practices. Gideon, trusting in his own discernment, made a mistake that had significant repercussions. It serves as a solemn reminder that even well-intentioned actions can lead to serious spiritual deviations when not aligned with God's will. Gideon's ephod marks a turning point in his spiritual journey. From this moment on, we observe a man progressively distanced from the God who called him. The consequences of this decision were not limited to him, but affected all the people of Israel. It is a powerful testament to the responsibility that falls on spiritual leaders and the importance of staying true to divine instructions. After his rise as leader of Israel, Gideon embarked on a practice common among the powerful of his time, but contrary to divine ideals: polygamy. The book of Judges tells us that Gideon had many wives and at least one concubine, resulting in 70 sons. This decision, seemingly common for the standards of the time, had profound and lasting consequences. Gideon's polygamy reflects a progressive deterioration of his spiritual discernment. Although not explicitly condemned at that historical moment, the practice deviated from God's original plan for marriage, established in Eden. Gideon, who once so zealously sought the will of the Lord, now seemed more inclined to follow worldly customs than divine principles. The biblical text does not provide details about the family dynamics resulting from this situation, but we can imagine the challenges and jealousy, competition for attention and resources, and the creation of groups within the family were common problems in polygamous households. These family tensions would have had an impact not only on Gideon's personal life, but also on his ability to effectively lead the people of Israel. The specific mention of a concubine in Shechem adds an extra layer of complexity to the situation. This relationship resulted in the birth of Abimelech, who would later become a source of great tragedy for Gideon's family and for all of Israel. Gideon's decision to keep a concubine in a different city suggests a fragmentation not only of his family, but also of his loyalty and focus. It is important to note how this practice of polygamy contrasts sharply with the Gideon we know at the beginning of his story, a fearful man, seeking signs and confirmations from God at every step. Now, we see a leader who seems to trust more in cultural practices than in divine guidance, a subtle but profound change in his spiritual walk. Gideon's polygamy was like a disease that spread slowly. At first, it might seem harmless, but over time, it caused serious damage to his family and his spiritual legacy. Gideon's choices had lasting effects. They influenced not only his life, but the lives of his children and all the people of Israel. And as we'll see next, one of his children in particular would cause great problems in the future. Among Gideon's many sons, one stood out for worrying reasons. His name was Abimelech, which means, "My father is king." This name already indicated future problems, as it went against Gideon's decision not to become king of Israel. Abimelech grew up in a complicated family environment. As the son of a concubine, he probably felt less important than Gideon's other children. This situation created in him a dangerous ambition and a strong desire for power and recognition. The Bible tells us that after Gideon's death, Abimelech saw an opportunity to seize power for himself. He went to Shechem, his mother's city, and convinced the residents to support him. He used family ties and empty promises to gain their support. With the support of the inhabitants of Shechem, Abimelech committed a terrible and cruel act. He killed 70 of his half-brothers, Gideon's legitimate sons. The Bible describes that he killed them on the same stone. Only one of the brothers, named Jotham, managed to escape by hiding. This brutal act of Abimelech clearly showed how Gideon's wrong choices affected the next generation. The son he had with the concubine became a mass murderer, destroying almost the entire family Gideon had left. After this horrific act, Abimelech declared himself king, something his father had refused to do. This demonstrates how he did not respect God's will or his father's decisions. He was willing to do anything, even kill his own family, to obtain the power he so desired. Abimelech's reign was marked by violence, betrayal, and fear. His rule did not bring peace or prosperity to the people. On the contrary, it was a time of great instability and suffering for many. The story of Abimelech clearly and painfully shows us how a father's wrong choices can profoundly affect his children and an entire nation. The environment of polygamy and competition created by Gideon generated a son capable of committing terrible acts against his own family and his people. This sad episode in the history of Israel serves as a serious warning to us all. It shows how important it is to follow God's will in all areas of our lives, including our family life. The decisions we make today can have serious consequences in the future, affecting not only us but also the lives of those who come after us. The rise of Abimelech to power was just the beginning of a difficult period for Israel. In the years that followed, the people would face many difficulties and suffering as a result of this corrupt and violent leadership. After Gideon's death, the people of Israel faced a dark period. The strong leadership that once guided them was no more. The void left by Gideon soon filled with practices that went against everything he had fought for at the beginning of his journey. The Bible tells us that as soon as Gideon died, the Israelites quickly returned to worshiping false gods. They made Baal-berith their god. This was the same Baal whose altar Gideon had destroyed years before. It is sad to see how quickly the people forgot the lessons God had taught them through Gideon. This return to idolatry shows how the human heart can be fickle. The Israelites had seen God act powerfully through Gideon. They had experienced liberation and peace. But even so, they returned to their old sinful habits. The people not only worshipped false gods, but also completely forgot God. The Bible says that they did not remember the Lord their God, who had delivered them from the hands of all their enemies. This ingratitude must have deeply saddened God's heart. Furthermore, the Israelites also forgot Gideon's family. They showed no kindness to the descendants of the one who had delivered them. This shows how short the people's memory was and how ungrateful they were to those whom God had used to help them. This situation makes us reflect on the legacy that Gideon left. Despite his great victories in the beginning, his mistakes at the end of his life had a lasting impact. The people did not have a strong example of faithfulness to God to follow. Israel's return to idolatry marks the beginning of a cycle that would repeat itself many times in the history of the people. They would turn away from God, suffer the consequences, cry out for help, and God would send a deliverer. Gideon's story teaches us profound and timeless lessons. We see how even a great leader, chosen by God, can fall if he is not vigilant. Gideon's success led him down a dangerous path of excessive self-confidence and estrangement from God. Reflecting on this story, we realize that no one is immune to the temptations of power and wealth. Gideon began as an ordinary man, called by God for an extraordinary task. He showed admirable faith and obedience in the beginning. However, after his victories, he allowed pride and ambition to lead him astray. Gideon's choices remind us of the importance of remaining humble and dependent on God, no matter how successful we become. His example warns us about the dangers of straying from the principles that guided us to success in the first place. Furthermore, the story of Gideon and his son Abimelech shows us how our actions can affect future generations. The decisions we make today can have far-reaching consequences, influencing not only our lives, but also the lives of those who come after us. May we learn from Gideon's mistakes and strive to remain faithful to God in all circumstances of life, whether in adversity or success. Curious to know how Gideon's incredible journey began? We have a special video that tells the whole story of this unlikely hero. From his surprising calling to his greatest victories, you will discover how God transformed an ordinary man into an extraordinary leader. Click on the video that appears now on the screen to watch. And if you want to learn more about the hidden lessons of the Bible, be sure to subscribe to the channel. Click the subscribe button now and turn on the bell so you don't miss any of our upcoming ones. God bless you.